into this content. While I'm not a developer like Julie, I have been in the tech ecosystem for several years now, and actually got my start at Shopify, where I helped merchants scale their e-commerce businesses. So that was quite the deep pool to dive into. We launched New Idea Machine because we noticed two concerning trends in our ecosystem. The first is the lack of affordable, local, and secure software development. And the second is aspiring developers struggling to land jobs due to lack of hands-on experience. And so to solve these problems, New Idea Machine decided to start connecting founders with fresh tech talent who are mentored by industry experts. And our goal is to provide founders with the tools they need to launch and scale faster, whether they're doing that on their own, with us, or anyone else. I can't see the screen, Julie. Do you mind? Can you please go to the next slide?
Did it not work?
Oh, no, I'm still seeing the who we are. Okay, not a problem. We'll
Is anyone seeing the challenges founders face?
Yes, yeah. Perfect. All right. And now, because we speak to founders on a daily basis, we're hearing about the common challenges that they're facing when it comes to building software. And these are challenges such as MVPs being overloaded with features that they simply don't need. Unfortunately, theft of their IP. One client that we spoke to lost his life savings, so about $100,000, to an offshore company, and has literally nothing to show for it. No code, nothing. Building an app, sometimes that serves their immediate need, but can't scale with them, which means they have to go back to the drawing board and reinvest, which, as you can imagine, costs a lot more money and a lot more time. Founders being overcharged. Most founders we speak to have very limited budgets. We have yet to come across one that says, I have plenty of money and time, please do what you wish with it. Founders being misdirected, accidentally steered away from their original vision, usually by well-meaning individuals. One thing to point out, if you think you're building a software application and it's just one project that's one and done, think again. You're now officially becoming a software development company. And the reason this is because your product is never really finished. There's always new features, bug fixes, and dealing with technical debt that creeps in. And technical debt is the cleanup that is required after building an MVP as fast as possible. So you need to go back and build it efficiently. And this means that things like libraries, like date libraries or connecting with APIs, they either become outdated or they need to be replaced or refreshed. Sometimes there's security issues that need to be patched up. And next slide, please.
I think there's a major delay
Okay.
on the slide changes.
I'll let you drive that, Julie, and I'll just assume that you're on top of it. So the reason we're here today is to help you avoid these costly mistakes. So during our time together, you're going to learn about the 4 types of apps and which one's right for your idea, and the 5 types of MVPs, so you can start on the right foot and save time and money. At the end of our time together, you will receive a workbook that Janice will email to you, and that workbook will have additional information. It will cover everything we talk about today, so don't worry about taking notes, and then guide you down the right path with more questions to consider. And at the end of our time permitting, if we have time for questions, we will answer any questions that you might have. So, complete app versus MVP. Many founders think, and I was guilty of this myself, if you build it, they will come. This is not true, unfortunately. It's easy to get carried away with the excitement of bringing your idea to life. It's your baby, you want to nourish it. I can completely relate. But before you spend your time and hard-earned money, let's define what an MVP is and is not. An MVP is the bare bones demonstration of your idea. So it's the scaled down version of your app. Its purpose is to communicate your vision with investors and end users. And it's designed to test your core idea with minimal features. It's built quickly and cost effectively to gather user feedback. and it validates your concept before you dive in and invest into a full app. An app, on the other hand, is a complete version of your idea. So it is a tool that you can use on your phone, tablet, or computer that solves a problem, entertains, or makes life easier. It has all the functionality your end users need to perform a task. And you can think of it like a Swiss Army knife. It's a complete version with all the planned features. It's market ready, and you won't be embarrassed showing it to anyone. And it has full functionality. It's an app that is only built after you've proven your concept with an MVP. Now, the type of app that you might need can influence the type of MVP you build. And we'll dive into why that is in just a couple of minutes here. So it's important for you to know where you want to end up before you even begin building anything. Julie will explain the various types of apps, from the most cost-effective to the most expensive, and the simplest to the most complex. Now, your application will likely fall into one of 4 categories: low-code, web app, progressive web app, or native mobile app. And over the next minutes, we will explain the difference between each one. Now, there are some critical differences, such as how fast it is to build each type of app, how customizable it is, its compatibility with various platforms, IP ownership, this is a big one, and whether the app is scalable or not. Okay, over to you, Julie.
Thank you. Well, the first app that we're going to talk about is the low-code app. And I'm sure you've all heard a ton of hype and excitement about how easy and fast it is to build low-code apps. And this can be true, can be very low cost and easy to build, but there's certainly things to be aware of. We feel that low-code apps are probably best for things like prototyping and creating your MVP. They can also be really useful, like as internal tools within your company, things to kind of automate workflows and make a few things easier. They're also fantastic for startups and specifically non-technical users. So what a low-code app is basically using a visual development platform, typically with a drag and drop interface to build your app. I guess something to compare it to would be it's kind of loosely similar to building a site on WordPress or another website builder. So kind of pulling items here and there and creating your UI. It can be a fast and cheap option if your app is very simple and straightforward. It's fantastic to allow non-developers to build an app because it does not use super techie language or technical jargon. It's still built properly behind the scenes, like it likely has a SQL database, but everything is kind of masked using everyday terms to make it much easier. I'm sure you've heard of platforms like Bubble for building a low-code web app, or even Thunkable for building a mobile app. To summarize, the pros of a low-code app are that it, of course, has fast development, and similar to WordPress, it has pre-built integrations, kind of like plugins per se to add other work tools. It's very accessible for non-developers. There are certain things you do need to be aware of, though, is limited customization. So if you're looking for super complex features that you want to add in your app, that's where you might run into issues. You might find yourself having to still hire a developer to be able to add in some custom functionality, or even possibly hiring developers from those platforms to build out your more complex features if they're able to. You are also subject to vendor lock-in. So once you start building on that platform, it's pretty much got to stay there, and you have to pay the fees associated with building it and hosting it as well. And if you ever think, well, I'll just take my code and build it custom after, think again, you're likely going to have to rebuild. A lot of those platforms don't have a way where you can take your code and then turn it into a custom framework. The next app we're going to look at is the one that's probably been around a very long time, which is the web app. As you can see, this one has a more moderate price tag and moderate time to build, and that's due to the fact that it requires probably custom coding. It's good for so many use cases, anything from B2B or B2C services. Like, you can log into the Netflix web app and, watch movies, or CRMs, banking apps, basically any apps where you don't need to download it on a phone. And what this is, it's an app that is viewed in your browser. So you might use, something like Chrome or Microsoft Edge or Safari, one of those to view this app. And you can use it on any device that has internet connectivity. It's pretty easy to build, easy and fast, and you do not need to have it in an app store. So basically the pros of this is that it's fairly fast development. You do not need to install it on a mobile device. It's very customizable, super flexible and scalable. It's a great starting point to, scale or even turn that into a web app later on. I mean, a mobile app later on. The cons would be is that it requires internet access while you're using it. And it may not be as performant as certain native mobile apps built specifically for your phone. Next, we're going to go to one that you may not have heard about. A lot of our clients have not heard about this yet either. So what this is it's a progressive web app, and has like similar price tag to a regular web app, but the actual app is slightly different. This is also great for startups and MVPs. Any of these service-based apps that we were talking about, streaming, customer relationship management platforms. And what this is, it is a web app, but it can appear as an app on one's phone. So you can perhaps go to a website, use a QR code, and then it can download an icon on your phone. So a user will still kind of look at it as somewhat of a mobile app, but in reality, it's a web app that's disguised kind of a mobile app. And the benefits to this is that it's much cheaper than building a native mobile app. Some companies are even choosing to, who have mobile apps, they're choosing to also add in perhaps a progressive web app so that customers can use their app on desktop, laptops, or any mobile devices. This is also a great idea even as an MVP for when you're building your mobile app. So maybe in the beginning, if you're just testing a few ideas, maybe you start off with a progressive web app, as long as it doesn't need some of the features that your phone has, like perhaps like GPS and pedometer and like biometrics and things like that. It can kind of have some offline availability for users. There's ways to kind of work around that, where there may be some features that may be available offline. But to note, this is not available in the App Store. I think there's ways to kind of go around that if you want to, but you'd probably choose this option if you are not bothered about having it available in an App Store. Yeah, most of our clients, immediately think, oh, I need a mobile app, but really, they might not actually need a mobile app. This might be absolutely fine for their use case. And the pros of this is that it's moderately fast development, limited offline features. It's very customizable and scalable, and we're going to call it downloadable to a phone. So your users will feel like they're using a mobile app when in reality it's a web app. The cons would be that, of course, limited mobile features, and it's pretty much, without extra work, it's not available on app stores. And lastly, it may not be quite as performant as apps that are built for your phone. And that's what we're going to touch on right now. So lastly, a native mobile app. So I feel like this is what most people think of when they think apps. They automatically think those little icons on their phone that they can tap and then have access to all these fun features. This is where you get into generally a much heftier price tag and more time to build. In our opinion, we really really believe that this is best for a specific use case. It's like, do you need your app in an app store? And do you need to access all of your phone features and easily do that? If not, you might want to go back and consider the progressive web app. So native mobile apps are built specifically for mobile platforms like Android or iOS, and they will offer your users a fantastic, seamless, high-performance mobile experience. The pros, like I said, high performance, offline access, very customizable and scalable, and app store availability. Cons are that when dealing with things like app stores, there's extra fees, approval processes, and things like that, if you want to use that. And of course, if you're monetizing your app, of course, the app stores can take a cut of that. And native mobile apps are more complex to build and maintain, which results in the higher price tag. Pass it off to Ria.
Thanks, Julie. So before spending time and money on an app, you obviously want to validate your idea with an MVP, which costs far less. I'm assuming that you've already looked into this, but just for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to touch on this anyways. Before building your MVP, you need to have a very solid understanding of the following. Customer pain points. What is the top problem you're trying to solve? There might be many, but it's really important for the sake of your budget to focus on the biggest one to begin with. Detailed personas. While many people can benefit from your MVP, it is important to focus on your ideal customer. So think of a mental health app. While we can say that anybody and everybody could and should benefit from a mental health app, realistically, it'll only be a small fraction of the population that will have any interest and the dedication to using it. Business goals. Why are you building this app? Is it to pitch? Is it to gather feedback, or another reason? Understanding this before you start building will help you stay on track and stay within your budget. Roadmap. Identify what success looks like at each stage. This is crucial. Again, we're going to talk about scope creep later on, but it's very easy to get caught up in the excitement. And then before you know it, you've blown through your budget and then some, and you may not be anywhere close to the finish line. Vision. What is the best case scenario? What long-term impacts do you want users to have? Again, having this understanding and sticking to it is going to help you save money in the long run. So now we're going to talk about optional versus essential features. So, or essential versus optional features. So think needs versus wants. Bit of cautionary advice here. We often see this. Founders tend to blow their budgets, as I mentioned earlier, on scope creep. And this happens when features are added after the work has begun. So a lot of times founders think, well, this is just a minor little tweak, right? Like you can just change this to do with this. But in actuality, it will take developers many hours to undo what they've already built and then go down a different track. And unfortunately, founders often second guess their choices and tend to veer off from their original plan, which again, unfortunately, directly affects timeline and budget, and will always lead to delays and higher costs and lots of headaches down the road. So for this reason, we only recommend you begin building after you have finalized your core features. And core features, again, are those that can immediately solve your customer's pain point. So some critical questions for you to consider before you even begin building. What is my budget? This is a big one. This will determine what you can and cannot afford to build. Will I be pitching to investors? Again, this will shape what you build. Investors may only need a slide deck or a very simple mock-up of what your app will do. They may not need to actually use the app like your end users might. Am I willing to build quickly now and then rebuild later? This, again, will come down to budget. If you cannot do that, then as Julie mentioned, you may want to choose a different app to go with. Who is my audience and what platform do they use? Do you really need that mobile app, or can you build it in another application? What is the plan for scaling my MVP? Again, goes back to that roadmap. Knowing where you're going to end up will certainly help you stay on track. Now, in the workbook that you will have emailed to you at the end of this presentation, you will find additional questions that will help you go through the process of identifying exactly what you need to build, and also what you may not need just yet. Now, there are 5 types of MVPs, as we mentioned earlier, and the easiest way for us to explain the various types of MVPs to non-technical people like myself is to compare them to various stages of building a house. And Julie will now walk us through the 5 most common types of MVPs.
All right, so the first type of MVP we're going to start taking a look at is called a prototype MVP, and this probably has a decently lower price tag and build time. This is best for just testing a concept and even the user flow or user experience before building, just to gather some feedback. In terms of building a house, we're going to compare this kind of to a virtual walkthrough of a house. So maybe you can navigate through the rooms, maybe you can open some doors or flick the lights on. I'm not sure what those have, but we're comparing it to that. So in terms of building the actual MVP, what it would look like is a visual or interactive mock-up. And this will probably be created by a UI UX designer or somebody that knows how to use a platform like Figma for prototyping and designing. This is where your users can walk through or navigate through your app, maybe push buttons and that appear to do something, but none of that data is real, and it's just built for, just kind of showing the users what it would look like. It's, so it'll demonstrate the look and the feel of the app, but without any actual app functionality. So just to reiterate, this is not an app and it does not have functionality. So that will be built completely separate and possibly even at a different time than your prototype MVP. Next, we are looking at a piecemeal MVP. Again, this chances are it'll have quite a low price tag and build time. This is fantastic for, validating some of your ideas without having to employ custom developers or a company to build your app. In terms of house building, we're going to think of it kind of like building your house with pre-existing materials, like, for example, a shipping container and maybe some windows that you find that you want to add in, or doors. Relating it back to your actual MVP, it might use certain tools that exist already, like Google Forms, CRM, email marketing tools. There's numerous things that can be added in here, and it would commonly use something like Zapier to connect them all together. And assembling existing components. This is basically assembling existing components together to build what looks like an application. Notes, this would probably be quite a temporary solution, depending on how many people you need to use it. If it's maybe just for, using in your business, that's fine. But the minute you start throwing, thousands of users at it, you might run into problems with scalability. So chances are you will want to rebuild this one as you scale.
So just before you move on, Julie, we just have a question in the chat. Would this be the same, the piecemeal MVP be the same as ad hoc?
I guess this is the word we use for it. I guess an ad hoc might be. I'm just not sure of the verbiage there. I guess if an ad hoc is using things that are already made, probably, but I can look into that probably after the presentation and just confirm. The next feature, or the next MVP, we're getting into a single feature MVP. And this is where we start to get in a little bit more time and money due to custom coding. And by the way, the amounts we use on here are kind of like what we found are kind of estimates, and what we found our clients seem to be when they're happy with this point in their MVP journey, or this type of MVP. Like, there's always going to be ways to make it cheaper, and there's always going to be ways to make it far more expensive, but this is kind of just a starting point number. The single feature MVP is for trying out some of your app's most important features. So the ones that add value to your business and make you completely stand out from the crowd. So this would be to gauge interest and collect some feedback. In terms of building a house, it's kind of like, if you consider the kitchen the heart of your home, and maybe a living space as an important place for your family to gather, maybe you'd consider those the first 2 rooms to finish of your home, so that you get the look and the feel and the important functions done, but without having to build all the extras. In terms of your app, it would be like, perhaps if you're kind of building an Airbnb type application, it would be, maybe you have some fantastic search functionality and you want to show that in the beginning, or maybe you have a unique way for people to book their tickets. So maybe you just start off with those 2 core items. What else do I have? Another thing to consider, like Ria was saying, is it really matters who your audience is. So maybe at this point, if you're, pitching to investors, you might literally just show a couple important features. Like, you might just have that and kind of forego the, fancy dashboards and authentication and things like that pretty much go into any app. Or if your goal might be to release this to, if your goal is to release this to beta testers and early adopters, your app might look a little different. It might have those in there. So it's all about finding kind of that sweet spot where you're between having the correct users using it and just the features that they need at that time. This provides a great foundation for further development, very easy to scale, but like I said, you have to think about your functionality initially. So if you're going to just kind of launch this as a single feature, you just kind of risk losing the excitement and the energy from your audience if it doesn't really do much. So you decide what the core things are to launch this effectively. Next, we're going to talk about the Wizard of Oz type of MVP. So kind of a funny name, but you'll see why it's called that in a second. Has a similar price tag and build time as the single feature MVP. It's best for testing interests and workflows before spending the extra money on all of the automation that your final app will require. So if we're going to look at home building as a comparison, this can kind of be like your show home, where it looks beautiful, users can walk through it, but in reality, maybe your plumbing is not hooked up at this point, or maybe the electricity doesn't fully work, so you just show it in the daytime. But it's kind of like, if you want to give the people walking through your home some water, you might have to bring a case of water in for your car. So the background processes are all done manually by humans. And basically, it's an app that simulates automation, where users use the app and they believe it's all automated, but they have no idea that behind the curtain, it's actually people doing all the work. So that's why that one is called the Wizard of Oz app. Think of a food ordering app where maybe your users can browse menus and then place an order, but what they don't realize is in the background, there's people collecting the orders, phoning the restaurant, coordinating drivers, and arranging all that for the users. So it appears like, a fancy process is happening, but it's just people in the back. So again, great for testing ideas, but manual processes probably are not scalable in the long term. So if you can imagine, like, millions of users, you need thousands of people in the background scrambling to make those happen. So you still would have to build in some of that automation later. Next is the mobile first web app. And this one might be getting into a little more money and time to build. This is great for targeting audiences that, don't mind using a web app, but they're only going to look at it on your phones or primarily use it on their phones. So you can test some of the functionality you want without having to make a fully featured native mobile app, which is the expensive one that we talked about before. This can be moved to a desktop app, like while you're building that mobile app, or you just forget about it for the time being and then introduce that later on for desktop users. In terms of buying a house, like it's maybe kind of like a studio apartment where everything is in there, it does everything it needs to, but it's only just for a certain part of the population. So those that would maybe only afford a studio apartment or be happy with that. Basically, all the basic needs are covered for mobile users at this point. In terms of building an app, it would simply be a web app that has the design in place, the responsiveness to just view it on your phone at this point. And like, just to summarize, it can be expanded for desktop later or immediately and provides a great starting point for scalability. Landing page MVP. So not technically an MVP of your app. We're kind of throwing this in there as kind of a bonus. Definitely low cost, super fast to create. We feel this is best for gauging market demand and trying to generate some hype before investing in full development of any kind. In terms of building a home, we might think of this as an advertisement or a brochure, which basically says, like, this is the development that we're creating in this neighborhood. Do you have any questions? And you can view kind of the features our homes might have. That's basically just marketing for your upcoming MVP. So in terms of reality, this would be creating a marketing website or a landing page, maybe using something easy like WordPress or Wix or some other website builder. Users can read about your app, contact you, read frequently asked questions. The handy thing about this, though, is that people might be asking you questions that spark new ideas or even help you prioritize what's important to the population. So very good for gathering feedback. Other notes, this can be done before even building your app or even while building your app. Like, why not generate a bit of extra excitement while your app is being built? Main note, this is not functional in any way. This is purely a marketing piece that is done completely on the side. So you will still have to spend the time and money and effort into building your app. And next, I'll move back to Ria.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about some of the most common questions that we get from founders. And then, time permitting, we will answer any questions that you might have. Julie will now dive into the various types of questions, which tend to be more on the technical side. So I'll let her handle this.
But at this point, this is the time where if you guys do have some questions in between these, we're happy to answer those too. So we often get, I'm just going to look through some of the common questions we get. So actually, people often are shocked by the price of development because if they want something custom done. So there are some ways of making apps even cheaper. So things to be aware of when building an MVP is like things like, do you really need it to be super beautiful for your main app? Because thousands of dollars can get lost in hiring designers and UI UX people at this point and creating mock-ups and designs. But that is definitely a way to save money. And again, talking about necessary features only. So being very mindful of scope creep. And there are other ways of making things cheaper, like maybe you go to independent or freelance people as well. Of course, there's pros and cons for both sides, but certainly different ways to make app building and MVP building cheaper. Okay, this is a popular one. So can AI build my app or MVP? AI can certainly help. AI is a great tool. We even encourage it. We think it's a fantastic tool to kind of make things faster and cheaper. But the main thing to be cautious about is you still need the, you know, senior minds in the background who've been around a long time and know how to architect things properly and build. So you still need to essentially make sure people can speak the language of custom code for what AI creates. So I wouldn't say it would be perfect by any means, but it can certainly help as a tool to build more efficiently. Couple other, okay, this is one that I've seen people talk about on even LinkedIn and our clients. They ask questions like, should we be hiring a CTO to come in and help build our MVP or app? And that's all, again, completely up to different use cases. Chances are you'll be giving away things like equity in the business and you may have to hire externally, but if you build it, if you just do it internally, you get to keep the equity. It's handy if you really don't have technical expertise and you want someone else to kind of help you with that. That's a good, hiring a CTO can certainly help, but again, comes away with probably giving away some of your MVP. You may not to.
Sorry, Julie, also to add to that, this is something I've seen happen as well. The founder has a falling out with the CTO,
yeah,
and now they're stuck. Like, what do? You've got this agreement in place that you can't walk away from, but you don't see eye to eye, and now your development is stalled. So that is something else to keep in mind. Just be very cautious who it is that you decide to work with and give equity to. And if you're comfortable going down that road, then by all means, that may work for you. But also what we've seen happen is that sometimes the CTO may be an expert in one area, and maybe not quite all the areas that you need to build your application. And that may not be uncovered till later on down the process. So again, something to be mindful of before you make that decision.
There's a couple questions in the chat already. What's the best way to approach getting an NDA and finding some good legal resources? I personally don't deal with a lot of that side, so Ria would probably have more insight into that end of things.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you mean by getting an NDA. I mean, you can find MNDAs, like mutual non-disclosure agreements online, generic, that you can tweak as needed, and obviously have anyone that you're going to talk to, have them sign it. Like, before we even meet with clients, we send them an MNDA, so that they know that we're not going to, share their ideas with everybody that we come across. So definitely have that in place. Also keep in mind, it is really only as good as the paper it's written on. I mean, if somebody breaks that NDA, then your recourse is legal action, but then again, that's time and money that you may not have. So only share your idea with crucial people that you really need to share your idea with. Certainly don't broadcast it on socials or anything like that. Regarding the other question, good legal resources. Before proceeding with a building app, Good Lawyer is local, and we personally use them and do recommend them. They tend to be very founder friendly as well. Okay, so there's another question, but this one is really specific regarding energy. So what we'd like to invite you to do is perhaps reach out to us after the presentation, and we can certainly dive into the nitty-gritty. We would certainly need to get a little bit more information from you, but just to keep this applicable to everyone that's on this call, let's keep it to more general questions.
I'm just reading the extra questions. Okay, awesome. There's an answer for that. Other questions we get from people who don't understand the software building process. So we explain to people that software is often built using agile development. So I'm just going to give a very fast run through of what that might mean for your app and getting things built. So Agile is also used in a bunch of fields too. It's not just software, but what is kind of concentrating on a flexible and iterative approach to building your software, and really big on being adaptable and collaborating with others and building value as fast as possible. So it's very customer centric. So you always want to be paying attention to what the feedback you're getting from your clients, and basically like kind of immediately trying to incorporate, well, obviously you need to validate it, but like immediately incorporating things back into the process. Other features are focusing on being very adaptable. So, you know, maybe this isn't working. We change directions. Perfect. There's no commitment to staying the same direction, and you don't have to. So if suddenly somebody says, I don't want this feature anymore, I want to do this. Well, great. Then you do that. So it's basically kind of not getting stuck on a certain path. And it's also about continuous delivery. So constantly staying in that feedback and development loop. So incorporating it in there, delivering your next feature, and trying to keep that as fast as possible.
We have another question, Julie. Are there approaches to reduce the cost of building an MVP? For example, using an AI tool and your expertise. Again, pros and cons. I would really caution maybe even against going down this road, because AI, as you know, can hallucinate and often does. So we've seen it provide code that looks amazing, but when it comes to deployment, it does not work. And you know, that's the extent of my technical knowledge. So at that point, I bring a developer and go, okay, why is this not working? And usually it's because it's the wrong code. So if you take on a part of the build yourself and you're not a developer, if you are a developer, completely different story. We've done that with founders. But if you're not a developer, then a lot of time will be wasted on editing that code and making it work, which may not be worth it in the long run. You might be just better off having a developer do it from the get-go, who can read code, understands it, and knows how to catch AI when it's hallucinating.
The next question: how can a non-traditional tech business offering an innovative service develop a clear roadmap for creating an MVP? Not exactly sure. Like, is it talking about like a software solution or something like that? But this was actually one of the things I wanted to bring up. So developing the clear roadmap. Sometimes if you really are uncomfortable with what you're doing, this is where often product managers can be very, very helpful. So I'm sure on LinkedIn, you've seen all these new product management courses and people taking those, but those people are trained in trying to identify a need, identify your, like doing market research and identifying the people that you'd like to gear your app to. And they're trained in things like that, where it's developing a clear, wonderful roadmap. So I would almost consider maybe consulting them about how to go forwards.
Yeah. Another question: can you elaborate on the different time frames you mentioned? Is moderate in terms of weeks or months? Excellent question.
Right.
I wish we had a crystal ball for that one.
Yes. Yeah. I think, yeah, that depends on time and budget. So if you can afford to, you know, have a team of 6 develop your app super fast, you might be talking, or, you know, to develop certain MVPs, you might be looking at weeks. If
they're working full time.
If they're working, if they're working full time. I think though, in terms of most of the founders that we meet every day, like their budget is not in the 6 figures or anything like that would get things built that fast. So you're probably talking on the month side of things, or, you know, if their budget is tiny and it expands over time, we're probably talking maybe even a year or so, all depending on budgets. So, but generally I would consider a few months or something for some of these moderate numbers.
One example is a client, very well known in the tech ecosystem, came to us before he had grants available, and he had a very limited budget. His budget was $1,500 a month. And he said, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get these grants. Can we get started now? And the answer is yes. So we worked within his existing budget. And then when the grants did come in, then we were able to add more developers to his project and really pick up speed. So that is something that we can do, scale up or down as needed. Yeah, I mean, but again, we caution against overspending. Like we've seen far too many founders spend their life savings unnecessarily. So, because this is a big risk, because you're not sure. I mean, we all hope that our apps are, the next unicorn, but we really don't know. So just be very cautious how much money you allocate to building an app or even an MVP. We tend to talk a lot of founders out of spending more money just because we've seen far too many heartaches in this process.
Next question on the list is, where do you find the best resources and people to help build a low-cost MVP or app for a startup? Many answers, maybe many answers to that as well. Well, first off, like there's a lot of post-secondary and boot camps that are happy for a very low price, taking on an MVP build. Of course, you run into the fact that they are just students and they are learning. So what you get might not be super massive or impactful at that point. But if like $1,500 is your budget, well, then that might be an option. There's other options like hiring freelance developers, but of course, then you're dealing with an individual and kind of uncertainties there as well. And it also depends, like when you're getting into finding the right places to build a low cost, I'd say find places that are willing to start small. Many software companies out there are like, cool, you're building an app. Where in the 6 figures range are you looking? And the person's thinking, I was thinking like 5,000 or 10,000, but okay, so find resources that are willing to do that and just build what you need. So kind of the a la carte kind of app building for your MVP. Like I'll take a bit of this and a bit of that, put it together. So many other options there too.
To add to that, Inception U in Calgary is accepting founder pitches. So they have people going through their boot camp. They do, you can pitch your idea. If it's accepted, you can have a team of students work on your app. Again, just manage your expectations because they are students. And so while they may want to build the full MVP, they may only be able to build one feature of it. And then you would need to take that elsewhere to have that build continued.
And I was also from one of those. I was also from Inception U, so understand that at that point, the student's knowledge isn't super robust at that point. So definitely manage expectations, but it can provide a great starting point. Another question here. After the MVP step and proceeding with a progressive web app, is there any further considerations when going from a progressive web app only to a native mobile app in the future? For example, can the native app be based off of the progressive web app, or is it a completely different process? Well, it can move from one to the other. There's extra work involved, but for example, we would probably build the progressive web app in a framework. I'm sure you've heard of React. So we would use something like that. And then it's not a straight transfer, it's transfer to a React Native, which is the native mobile version of that. But so there's other work to do, but definitely all of the work that you've started with, creating databases and creating the basic front end, that's not completely lost. So it is sort of a rebuild, but not really. It uses a ton of the existing stuff, but it needs tweaking for sure to become a native app later. So I don't know, a bit of both worlds, partial rebuild or enhancements, I would say, on that.
Another question, and likely our last one, can you discuss the different types of developers that you might need for different features? Julie, I'll let you speak to the different languages here.
Yeah, so basically some of the ways we break things down in basic breakdown is we'd use, I'm sure you've heard terms like front-end developer or back-end developer or Android developer. So pretty massive question. So front-end developers would be probably doing your front-end features, and everyone has specialties on probably what features they'd be able to do, but if it has to do with the UI, the UX, or implementing UI and other front-end features that your users see, you'd be looking at a front-end developer for that. And you might even be able to get by, like if your MVP uses something like Firestore or something easy that lives in the cloud as the database backend, they might even be able to kind of do that front to back. If you're looking for features that are super data heavy and require a lot of manipulation of data and using databases, well, you'd probably be looking at a backend developer, and depending on how that's analyzed, then you're bringing in things like data analysts and a number of other people for that. So a very open question, but I hope that somewhat points you in the right direction. But there are definitely developers that are comfortable with certain platforms, certain types of development. There's probably thousands of options for that one. So again, contact us and we'll be happy to clarify even further.
And Julie, can you please move to the next slide?
Sure. Let me find that again. Did it work?
Not quite yet.
That's so slow.
So while Julie's finding that,
oh, it's up. We're just waiting on it.
Oh, I see. Okay, it's just a bit of a delay.
Yeah.
If you're still unsure which app is the right one for you, please visit our website. We have a quiz on there that will guide you. You just have to answer a few simple questions, and then it will tell you the result, the app that you should be considering and why. As mentioned earlier, Janice will be emailing you the workbook along with feedback survey shortly. And if you still have questions after going through the workbook and doing the quiz, feel free to reach out to us through our website, and we're always happy to help.
Oh, thank you so much, Ria and Julie, for joining us. And thank you to all of you for taking some time out of your busy days and lives to come and meet up with the folks here at ERIN and across the province. So we have a number of opportunities coming up for sessions like this, or if you are in the Edmonton area, in-person sessions, and I will include that in a follow-up email as well. And I guess really thank you for your time here today. And please let me know if there's anything that the ERIN can do to support all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.